Michael Cichon, you are today President of the International Council of Social Welfare, but you were also before at the ILO, and you were there in 2012 when the recommendation 202 on social protection floor was adopted. What was the major political struggle within the ILO before finally the recommendation was adopted by the 185 member countries?
Okay, so Karin, what you mean when you say within the ILO, you mean within the organization, not the office. You know, there's an office and there's an organization of 175 countries. But there was a major struggle for years actually that countries simply, or societies or governments simply did not believe that they could afford some level of social protection, no matter what level of development they had reached. So we had to break the myth that there are countries who cannot afford this. And the moment that we put out the figures and we put out the international examples, and we were actually helped by very successful new developments in social protection in the global south, in Brazil, in Mexico, in Thailand, in Nepal, in South Africa, where we all build elements of social protection, reaching out to a major share of to a major part of the population. That was helped, and that helped to overcome, together with our financial calculations, that helped to overcome some of the resistance. And what actually broke what we call the camel's back was basically the crisis in 2007 and 8. And governments began to understand that they can't just secure financial markets, they also have to secure the people. So we were riding a wave which overcame the initial resistance that many governments had towards redistributing income. They felt they cannot redistribute income without having a huge amount of growth. And what we could show them is that those societies in Europe and elsewhere who had introduced successful social protection system had done that while they were growing. They didn't wait till growth had reached a certain level and then they redistributed. They were growing with equity, as we say. And we could only make that argument in the context of the crisis.
And could you see how this framework, together with other frameworks from other social institutions on global level, have moved forward the debate or the actual implementation of social protection within countries?
Yeah, we see something that I call the great ambivalence. On the one hand, the global institutions, the international agencies, well, it's the UN, it's the World Bank, it's UNICEF, it's the ILO, it's WHO. They all more or less agree on the importance of social protection in national development. There are degrees of disagreements between the different institutions. For example, the UN organizations believe in a rights-based approach to social protection, whereas the World Bank rather sees a program-based approach. But in principle, we all agree that social protection is an important element to make societies and economies grow. It's a social and economic necessity. That's one hand. But on the other hand, what we see in many governments all around the world is that the majority of them today is cutting budgets. And if you cut a national budget, the biggest share in national budgets is always social expenditure. So social expenditure is overproportionally bearing the burden of the austerity measures. So you have this dichotomy where on the one hand everybody agrees, and behind the international organizations are always governments, so and stakeholders. So basically, there's lip service internationally to a lot more social protection on the one hand, and on the other hand, there is austerity measures that largely deeply cut into some of the social transfer systems, which basically leads to a situation where the stimulus packages that governments put up in the early phase of the crisis are now paid by the unemployed, by the people who seek medical care, by the pensioners, and by children who don't have access to proper education. Right? So we have won the day on the academic level, but we have not won. I mean, when I say we, I mean the people who propose more investment in social protection. So we won the day on the academic debate. We have not won the day in actual fiscal practice.
You have pleaded for a global fund for social protection. Why is that important?
Well, we it's not just the International Council on Social Welfare, but it's basically a larger community of NGOs that have supported the recommendation 202. I think we believe that there needs to be an independent funding for national initiatives, because which is unconditional in many ways. So if a country says we would like, or a society says, or if a group in a society says we would like to make a start on developing a protection system for the elderly, they should be given the means to analyze the options and to invest in the people that can possibly implement it. And that should not come as a result of a negotiation with any national or international donor, but it should create the independence of the country to make their own decisions. Because a lot of the funding that we see today for social protection programs implicitly comes with conditionalities, either from the World Bank, from the EU, from whatever national donor, because everybody has a certain longer-term political agenda that they would like to see implemented. Whereas an independent fund would at least give the opportunity to countries to develop their own proposals, their own systems, without necessarily following international fashion.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.